correctly, it apparently encourages them to grow back. This is the little patent they say. Sorry. So there's a question here.
What do you do about discarding stuff?
Okay.
Leftover salad or Shmitta wine, all my flowers that aren't in my
Okay. So in theory, anything that is holy should be not thrown away until it's inedible.
Okay.
This is a bit of a complex matter, because in theory that means if I throw it in where I threw yesterday's salad, well, yesterday's salad is not so edible. And not only that, it's starting to decompose, and putting the fresh salad on top of it will cause it to start to decompose. On the other hand, wrapping it up in a plastic bag and throwing it in the bin anyway, straight away, also causes it to decompose. There's enormous discussions about the best way to deal with such things. The first thing that's best is to finish what's on your plate. And most importantly, this is a lesson for life, is to not take anything out of the bowl that you don't intend to eat. Okay, this is the lesson for life. You know, you go to that salad bar at the falafel place, and people put as much as they can put in their little plate because it's free salad, right? So therefore, salat chinam, you only take what you need. Now that's the first side of it. The second side is that this is recommended by some, is in order to make it nicer, you actually buy a nicer receptacle to put it in. And that way, it doesn't look like the rubbish bin. So we already have this brown bin, which I have to admit composts very quickly depending on what you put in it. Okay? I don't like the idea of using the brown bin. Rav Lau is on record as saying that the brown bin could be a solution. Okay? Because it's separate already. I don't like it because, I don't know. Once again, I'm definitely not an expert in halakha like Rabbi Lau. I just find the brown bin a little odd. Because it has meat in it. Standard compost doesn't have meat in it, not because meat can't be composted, because it takes too long and it's a health hazard. But because our brown bins are thrown out somewhere like a kilometre out of town, they can put meat in it.
But if I didn't put meat in my brown bin, then
Well, I personally have a great issue with putting meat together with Shmitta waste, because the Talmudic definition of denigrating something, it's all about what happens when you throw out your tzitzit, is throwing them with the chicken bones. Okay, so you have to be careful. I'm saying there's no one solution. Everyone finds it's difficult. Have a nice way of disposing them, but really it's a time to encourage people to not just take all the salad that's there. Sorry, is another question? Yeah? Flowers for Shabbat. So there will be heter mechira flowers for sale. Right? You're going to ask whether this is a problem or not to buy heter mechira flowers. It's a philosophy. They're actually, having said that, because of the way that flowers grow, a lot of flower orchards actually are produced in accordance with Shmitta in a variety of things, because it's not like fruit trees, even more so vegetables, that really have to be produced every year. You will find there will be flower sellers that will be supervised. It's much easier to find, if you're looking for it, Mahadran flowers than many other Mahadran fruits and vegetables because of the nature of the way they are. But it is an issue. And once again, you think, I'm not going to take food on Shmitta to these people, I'll just buy them flowers. Okay? So just be careful how you do it, right? You know. So, yes?
Can you talk about the year after Shmitta?
The year after Shmitta. What happens? Well, in theory, produce is around till it's around. Shmitta produce is Shmitta produce. Its holiness depends on when it comes out of the ground, or not when you eat it. The next year it continues along. It continues along, and certain fruits, the time they form is in July or August. Literally right at the end of the year. And their Shmitta will start before Rosh Hashanah. It is an issue. Even more so with canned produce, canned tomatoes, for 6 to 7 months after Shmitta ends, will be all heter mechira in certain places. You have to decide what your personal thing you want to do is here. Sorry, yeah? The problem actually with the lists is that Israel is a very up-and-coming technological country, and that the lists get out of date very, very quickly. If Shmitta happened every year, it would be a gradual shift. But it happens every 7 years, and the lists actually get out of date. I can tell you now that the mango season in Israel 2 Shmittas ago was like 3 weeks. because there was a couple of orchards around the Kinneret. The mango season in Israel is not as long as it is in Australia, but it's now so much longer than it used to be. So it's not so simple. The lists need to be up to date and very carefully researched. And while it's easy in theory to get a list in advance, in my opinion, you've got to be looking at the time, because also the lists are also estimations. The stuff becomes available when it becomes available. And that's the reality of fruit produce. So the lists have changed, and, watch this space. Sorry, yeah? Okay. So, and after Rosh Hashanah, anything that is picked literally as it is, those kind of vegetables, straight away.
So let's say you go to the supermarket the day before Rosh Hashanah, and you buy regular or whatever. Once Rosh Hashanah comes in, you can still eat it. Do you understand?
Okay.
You're saying like the fruits and vegetables that you buy the day before Rosh Hashanah, we're still not, we consider part of the Shmitta year. Therefore, you won't have to be so careful with what's called.
Okay, so here's firstly, of course, the holiness comes from when it comes out of the ground. The next thing is, though, the problem with Shmitta is working the land and commercial harvesting. Fruit that is growing and you pick off is fine. It could be wrong if it's picked in the wrong fashion, but the food that is growing before Rosh Hashanah is fine. And so many things, other than things that literally grow in a very short cycle, for 2 to 6 weeks are not an issue at all for Shmitta. Even if they're picked, maybe they have Shmitta holiness. Right, but that's where they are. But then the things change. I mentioned tomatoes and cucumber are around for 3 to 4 months. Then they move to pot plants. And then the big plan of the Machon LaHalacha Ba'aretz is that starting from after Pesach, they've been working on it for years, all these hothouses in the former Gush Katif communities, which are now on the other side, literally in the firing line, I guess, right? They have been working to make maximum produce from May till September next year, because that's when everything else will have run out, and it will not. Some of the stuff is grown in the ground, but these areas are considered to be somewhat outside of the land of Israel. Olei Bavel didn't go there, and that's what you have at the tail end. I've seen a lot of general estimations about what the fruits and vegetables are, but they vary, and so I'm keen not to make broad statements. The lists are around, and the reason they're difficult to get is because they vary and change, and these are the valid reasons for them. But there will be things available that are apparently all okay. You just have to go to the right store. And I have to point on that, the Otzar Aretz store, not everything there will be Kedushat Shvi'it. Some things will be that are produced in other ways, produced in hydroponics, produced in pot plants, produced outside of the specific land. Sorry, yes, a question? Okay, there was another question here?
So we're talking mostly about the kid and is one of them holy and one isn't, basically?
So the Rav Kook writes clearly that it is appropriate to treat Hetzem Achira as holy in order to show your love for the land of Israel, and he gives a number of other interesting reasons for that. Now, that gives people the situation to say, does that mean it is holy or not? The simple rabbinic understanding is it is not, because the majority of people do not hold that land owned by non-Jews produces food that has Shmitta holiness. The Bnei Brak and other communities treat it as holy, not as a way of disrespecting Hetzem Mechira or overly respecting Hetzem Mechira, but because they treat anything that is grown in the land of Israel as being holy. End of story, whether it was permitted to be grown or not. So it is a question. There is an idea, once again, that if you throw your holy things in with too much rubbish, you're not treating them as holy. So if you treat everything as having sanctity of Shmitta, nothing has the sanctity of Shmitta. Lahavdul, your nappies. The kids ate Shmitta food, right? So there has to be a point where you break it down. That's the wrong word to use. So there has to be a point where you may, but it's a personal decision. So some people like to treat Hetzem Mechira as having Shmitta holiness, and some people like to specifically not treat it that way. Okay. About what? Prickly sabra. So they're a fruit, right? So wild things are all permitted to pick, because you can permit anything wild. Harvest it. What's wrong is to pick a bush you really like and tend to it, as a public service, a self-serving public service, because you'll pick some fruit off it. Nothing wrong with taking it. What is wrong is saying, I like making sabra jam. And no one likes it here anyway. So normally every year I come and take about it all and nobody cares. Okay? You can't do that. You can go to it one day, pick them, eat them, and pick more. But you can't pick more than a reasonable amount. That is the issue. That is the limit. There's actually a separate thing here that relates to the passion fruit bushes that we all love here in Modiin. There are limits on what you can do with it. You shouldn't do something not standard with it. So the standard discussion is that are you allowed to grind your potatoes if they're Kedushat Shvi'it potatoes? Okay. But the standard conclusion is that grinding potatoes is a standard use. But certain things are not normally, like lemons are very commonly juiced, oranges are, but certain other fruits are not. So I love making mango sorbet. I did not see how I could do that on Shmitta year. But having said that, passion fruits do not get ground up at all when you do things with them, because they come ground up, basically. They come mushy. And so I see a lot of leniencies working with passion fruit because it comes that way. A number of authorities will not permit the manufacture of silan with Kedushat Shvi'it dates. So.
Weaning, like...
Sorry?
When you feed your kids,
yeah.
you do all sorts of weird things to food that you would never normally do to them because you're saying you're bringing up at the pace for a 5-month-old. Presumably they're at the age of 13 and you can still like break your microwave the yogurt and stuff like that, or...
The problem isn't break it up into... The actual standard approach is probably isn't break it up into little pieces. The problem is processing it. So it's interesting. Some people are very picky about processing Kedushat Shvi'it food. Once again, if it's not Kedushat Shvi'it, it's not an issue. If it's tinned, it's not an issue. But it depends on the nature of the fruit. Some people are picky about it. The real reason to be lenient on any of these things is if you're eating it straight away. Because the general problem, now that's not an overarching leniency, but the general problem is, jam making, basically. That's the far end of the extreme. When is jam for? Next year. We don't need, Shmitta food is not for next year, it's for this year. You shouldn't be keeping all the, berries that grew on the trees and making jam for next year. You should be sharing them with your neighbours. Oh, no, but that's different because they're in theory is freezing the pre-Shmitta food.
So they're not freezing Shmitta?
Well, the supermarkets aren't. There may be individuals who do it. The supermarkets are not doing that. The supply chains are preserving the pre-Shmitta food in order to get around more of the various Shmitta issues that are there. Now, the supermarkets in general are not that strict. They want anything that is acceptable. Okay. But some of them are more strict, and as someone mentioned here, the issue of suppliers. Some of their suppliers are strict, and the suppliers are trying to get things. Oh, here.
When bananas, my wife and I, the bananas are going off, we typically freeze them to make it into banana ice cream. Yeah, it's technically a sorbet, like you said not to do.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's preventing the waste of the bananas, but it's also doing something.
I have to admit, I personally have a problem with freezing whole bananas because you're not doing anything to them. My problem was with making mango sorbet because you're processing it, and most people actually like to eat mangoes whole, as opposed to certain other things where people like to mash them up, like potatoes. Bananas are whole. And people talk about making cakes, is it an issue or not? It depends on the nature of the fruit. I have to admit, you will not find too many Kedushat Shvi'it bananas. Because they do grow some in Israel, but not many. Most of our bananas are imported from Central America, I believe. Is this correct? Many of them are. Sorry? I don't know all the things. So a lot of bananas are imported. If you have an issue with importing fruit, it wouldn't be on things that are imported year-round. It's on things that are important. Bananas is a difficult one, I have to admit, in terms of mashing them up into cake. We love making banana cake with old bananas. It's fantastic. As I said, I don't have an issue with freezing bananas because you're not doing anything to them. Problem is preservation through action, not by putting it in the fridge or the freezer. Bananas, the kids also like to eat whole. The question is, if you're going to ask if it's going bad, are you not preserving it to make it eat longer by putting it into a cake? It's a good question. I don't know. Bananas, I don't know, difficult with. Although freezing them, I don't see a problem with. Sorry. Yeah. It's actually controversial. It's controversial. There's these lovely discussions in this book with pictures of 6 different dates that have been mashed, squashed, diced, processed. And at the end of it, it shows a tub of silan. It says, well, this we can agree on, right? The silan. It's very subjective, and it's a problem. It's subjective. And I can say I have a problem with it, and you can say I disagree with you, and I can't argue with you, because it's very subjective. What is the normal use? Because everyone agrees apparently that potatoes, it's a normal use to do stuff with. But why not bananas or strawberries? So I'm going to make a wonderful, as a way of introducing us, closing down the last few questions, a wonderful sidetrack. There's a wonderful essay in the Aruch HaShulchan's discussion about the laws of Chaticha Hara'ui Likabed, which is the concept that if there's a piece of meat that is fit to be put by itself on a plate in front of a guest, no matter what happens to that particular piece of meat, if one of those pieces of meat was actually not kosher for some reason, it can never be batel with other pieces of meat. And someone states in halacha that there's no such thing as something that's important in one place and not in the other. And the Aruch HaShulchan writes, it says that's a lovely idea because it makes the world simpler. But he then brings a dozen different examples to show that it's not correct. And he starts talking about chicken livers being something you would put in the center of somebody's plate in Austria, and then in Czechoslovakia it would be the sides. And then everything is subjective. And then we have supposed Israeli custom, and then we move from outside of Israel and we bring in our own customs. And how do Israeli kids eat bananas and strawberries? Yeah, in a drink, right? So a standard cooking is considered, well, firstly, peppers and onions, that's exactly what everyone does with them. That's considered the most normal use. It can be treated with it. It's getting more controversial is the concept of passing on the flavour. Some people, therefore, would treat it as kedushat shvi'it. But once again, that means careful how you serve it, careful how you eat it. But the main problem actually mainly is with fruit, because virtually all vegetables are used in a very utilitarian fashion. It's fruit that people love to just pick mangoes and eat them, even though most of the year round they buy some kind of frozen concentrate product. They really love them. Mangoes is that way a great, real example, But when you're dealing with vegetables, virtually all of them they're leaning on. That's hence the ridiculous discussion about dates in this particular book. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, but there's a problem with freezing and preserving.
Well, as I said, freezing doesn't seem to such a big problem because you're not doing anything. Sorry? The problem with freezing it is you're going to keep it for 6 months. As opposed to freezing it for a week or two. Okay, but the problem is, you don't freeze it whole. The problem is you do stuff to it. This is my perspective on it. Because the problem is what's called ibud, working them, not preserving it, not salting it, not putting it in a place that it won't go bad. Sorry, Dean?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the difference between Hesh and Kira and Kodesh Shvi. So all these technical problems and how to use, fruit to grow is just in relation to Kodesh Shvi.
It's Kedushat Shvi'it. Heter Mechira, according to most authorities, does not have Kedushat Shvi'it, and the problems do not apply to it. Hence, once again, one of the reasons people state that it's important to have Heter Mechira around, because the less religious people, give them something they can eat, and don't give them a long spiel. You feel it's special to eat holy fruit? Be holy. Let them eat something.
So, and food is usually sold it's usually indicated whether it's Kodesh Shvi.
Yes, as I said, Kedushat Shvi'it food in theory shouldn't be sold too broadly, which is the issue with using it too much in restaurants and catering. Because it's all very well when you go and buy a falafel, but when you say, I'm having friends over, I'm going to go and buy a huge Israeli salad, right? Sorry, yeah.
You mentioned the book you wrote.
Yeah.
What books do you recommend?
So I highly recommend, specifically this book here by Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon called Shmitta. It's both in Hebrew and in English. It's recently been republished for Shmitta, a bit late. It only came into print 3 weeks ago. It's sold by Koren. It costs 130 shekels retail, but the local Koren guy here will sell it to you directly for 97 shekels if you contact him. Okay.
All right, go back to the processing of food.
Yeah.
Okay, so from what I understand, processing of fruit in a way that isn't normal is mostly where the problem lies, as opposed to processing of vegetables.
Yeah, because vegetable, that's...
What about carrot cake?
Sorry, carrot cake.
Because that's grating carrots and processing carrots in a way.
I do want to state you will not find too many Kedushat Shvi'it carrots. It's the nature of carrots. Okay? It's the nature of carrots, because carrots need to be grown very deliberately. They're all planted individually. So Kedushat Shvi'it carrots will only exist where they are planted before Shmitta and appear in the few weeks after the year starts. Okay? So nuts are considered... So in theory, raisins and prunes will not be made for Shmitta. Raisins and prunes. Well, it could be, but that's where you get people who are in that kind of business. That's why they get more into Heter Mechira. You think, why would you bother go to Heter Mechira grapes? Because they grow anyway, right? Because if you want to make produce, they won't allow you to make Kedushat Shvi'it produce like that. But having said that, nuts are completely... But having said that, virtually all nuts have inedible shells. There are a few who do have edible shells. Okay? Virtually all nuts have inedible shells. And the nut is Kedushat Shvi'it, and that's what it is. So almond trees is the best example. There is a decent almond produce in Israel. Unlike peanuts and other nuts, they don't have a semi-edible skin that people feel like throwing away. There is a completely inedible shell, and there is the edible nut. Almonds have Kedushat Shvi'it, and they last a long time on the trees as well. And they'll be around. Yes.
I seem to recall in my vague memory, Shlomo's almond, there was a kind of thing all over and talking about fruits, the Kedushat Shvi'it or the Chal Shvi'it.
What specifically is the inyan?
I understand. I went to Shiur many years ago. It said that Shlomo's on Robach said that there was a way to make on fruits.
Now here specifically, this is talking about Otzar Beit Din, the concept that the fruit grows naturally on the tree. And he may then have been extending it to Heter Mechira to state that even though it was being done in the Heter Mechira fashion, that what did they really do to a fruit tree? You know, a bunch of non-Jewish workers went in and did a bit of pruning or whatever they did, right? And really it would have grown anyway. I believe that's what the Heter would have been, and he would have stated potentially to treat it all as Kedushat Shvi'it. Actually, there's one more thing I have to add to this. Last Shmitta, about 9 months into Shmitta, a sign appeared in their supermarket in Efrat stating, we've been investigating, and a lot of the fruit in the supermarket, it's not clear whether it's Otzar Beit Din or Heter Mechira. Which is a great messy thing that shouldn't happen. It should be very clear which is which. It's not clear which is which. Certain fruit trees can really get by very well without doing anything for them for 1 year out of 7. And they just go out on an Otzar Beit Din angle and they do what they do. And that also may be where this particular mess comes in. So while fruit is messy to do with working it too much, it's very easy to do with many aspects of Shmitta. And so you will find people in Jerusalem who would not buy any single Israeli-produced vegetable, but would be happy with fruit for these reasons. Because it's fruit, and it would have grown anyway. You know, once the 3 years have passed, the vorel would have grown anyway. Maybe someone made it grow a bit better.
What's the rules for Shmitta wine?
Shmitta wine. So because it's the laws of Truma, that because wine and olive oil are the best way you can make grapes and olives, obviously, therefore it's permitted to make wine and olive oil, even though that appears to be working out of it, because that's the best thing you do. And so therefore, as opposed to, as I said before, sultanas and raisins, which may be nice, but it's not the best thing to make. So therefore, we have this produce of Otzar Beit Din wine. Now there's two forms of Otzar Beit Din wine. There's the wine you will buy in the supermarkets that says Otzar Beit Din on it. I mean, it sounds to me like Otzar Beit Din wine. And there is wine you can only buy one bottle at a time from people who ask you how many bottles you need. I don't want to go through the whole deal of that. So you just should simply be aware again that sometimes people ask you about it. In theory, the wine you have to be careful with. The most famous halakha they state is that you don't overfill the cup on Havdalah unless you intend to drink everything. Now, certain Hasidim are very picky not to drink what drips out of the cup. My kids will drink it if it's on the floor. We have to keep them away from that. So you're not dipping the candle in it. All of these things. So I like to use Otzar Beit Din wine and grape juice for making kiddush. I like to serve it at the table. Once again, often we serve wine to people until they stop drinking it. You don't do that. Again, I get a bit Maimonides and Rambam here and state, serve people food as they want. Don't serve them, we all have the Yiddish mama who wants to shove food in people's mouths, but no. So in theory, this is the only little issue, is in theory, the wine has to be let go when it's out of season. Now, I'll give you a quick primer on letting things go. The Yerushalmi has these wonderful stories about how people found that a certain thing was announced, it's out of season tomorrow. So people would go out to the middle of the street at 2 a.m. with a box of different fruit, and they would say, if anyone else wants them, they can come and get them now. And then no one would come, and then they'd take them back home. That's a little over the top, but in theory, you're meant to relinquish ownership at the end of season. Wine is difficult because it's not clear what the season is. See, when you're talking about mangoes, it's pretty clear when they disappear out of the stores. Okay, but the wine doesn't come into the stores for at least 3 or 4 months. So where it's actually more of an issue, according to some, is that if you buy Kedushat Shvi'it wine a year or two after Shmitta, then you go through this rigmarole of leaving it for anyone else to take it. And if nobody does, then you pick it up and take it home, and then it's yours to keep for as long as you want. I have relatives in Bnei Brak who do that and drink Otzar Beit Din wine the entire 7 years. They're very, very crazy about it. Well, you can apparently, because it's a standard thing to do, because you're not working it. Apparently cooking with wine is fine. You don't throw it out, yeah. Cooking with wine is fine. Okay. I'm dragging a bit on here. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. It's been very informative here. The shiur will be posted